You know, people have said this new season of Always Sunny Season 17 has felt like the original golden age of the series. Well, episode 6 of the season has taken that more literally than before. Overage drinking, a national concern, is a throwback, and not just a couple seasons back, but instead going all the way back to the beginning, bringing back one-off characters from season goddamn 1. Tammy and Trey, the high schoolers Dee and Dennis dated in the third ever episode of the series, have returned, encountering the gang when their own son is found drinking in the pub, and this leads to a revitalization of the twins' interest in their lives. Meanwhile, Mac and Charlie go searching for Frank, who is barely in this episode at all, possibly as a callback to the fact that he was not in Season 1 at all, though it could just be for the ultimate twist that we all honestly saw coming. What is that twist? Well, let's get talking. I do think I'm going to cover Mac and Charlie's plotline first, since it's quite a simple and quick one. Charlie has noticed that Frank is entirely missing, and Mac agrees to help him with the hope that the mystery will somehow turn into a psychosexual thriller. In other words, Mac has nothing else going on today. In the search for Frank, Mac and Charlie encounter two of my absolute favorite side characters in the series, Cricket and Uncle Jack. I had been complaining about Cricket taking so long to appear in this season, but we knew he'd show up at some point, and it happened to be in this episode. Unfortunately, both of these cameo appearances are a little underwhelming, especially if they're going to be the only time these two appear in Season 17 at all, though that's not to say that I didn't enjoy them. Cricket, who always seems to have a different bit going on every time the gang runs into them, has now taken on a sort of Jamaican persona, complete with dreadlocks and a potentially offensive accent. Now, the show's treatment of Cricket has certainly changed over the years. For the first 8 or so seasons in which Cricket appears, the entire joke with him was his rapid descent in physical appearance, getting a new scar or other injury every episode. The makeup team would really go all out, to the point where the showrunners seemed to think that things were getting a little over the top by the time that they burned half of his face off in Season 10. I personally disagree, and would have loved to see them go even further. I don't care if they started chopping limbs off. It's more hilarious than actually disturbing, especially with how Cricket takes it in stride. Though I think it was more for David Hornsby's sake for anything, and I get that. The poor guy would be sitting in the makeup chair for hours on end. After this era, they kind of resorted to a sex joke thing with Cricket, having him be constantly bringing up his bestiality and other uncomfortable moments of his life, which was good at first, and still kept him as one of the best side characters, but waned with time to the point that he's not nearly as funny as his earlier roles. In the last 2 seasons, with Cricket's boy slut in Season 16 and his Jamaican accent in this episode, it seems like they've decided to turn him into a sort of Lynchian, mysterious cryptid that takes on different personalities each passing day, and it's definitely brought back his uniqueness. They've gotten back to doing things with Rickety Cricket that no one would ever expect, and I think that's a comfortably entertaining place for his character to be. Uncle Jack, I have much less to say about. Really, his role in this episode is a lot more normal than you'd expect. He was employed to be Frank's lawyer for an undisclosed reason, and gives Mac and Charlie as much information as he can without violating any agreements. He's actually a pretty regular lawyer, though he does make some weird remarks towards the end. I love Uncle Jack, but I have to admit that his shtick is pretty repetitive. He sort of does the same thing in every episode he's in, which was great in Season 1 because he was genuinely uncomfortable and confusing in a way that you couldn't help but chuckle. But once you adjust to it, his whole creepy uncle thing is a little dry. Personally, I think what Cricket and Uncle Jack both need is a spotlight episode where they actually have genuine relevance. I think Jack shines the most nowadays when he's actually in the field of law, like in Dennis Gets Divorced or McPoyle vs. Ponderosa. I'd love to see a bigger role for him because small appearances in every season, it's not really his thing. Ultimately, the reveal is that Frank has landed a role on The Golden Bachelor, something which we kind of already knew was going to happen given the final episode, but it is interesting that Rob and Charlie have chosen to tackle a multi-episode storyline, since this episode, and the next, both also revolve around Frank's dating show escapades. I'm certainly interested to see how this goes over, because this is a story you can get a lot of jokes out of. Okay, let's finally get to Dennis and Dee. I have to say, the first thing I really respect about this story is that Trey and Tammy are played by the exact same actors as they were when they were kids, being Robert Adamson and Jamie Alexander, the latter of which actually has quite a respectable amount of fame. It's telling of the community Sonny builds that these two were happier to return after literally a 20-year break. The scenes with them and the twins, though, are kinda weak for me. I'm just not a fan of plain old awkward humor, and there's not much more than the usual here. You can figure out pretty easily that Dennis will smell weird and Dee will be creepy because that's just who they are. A good comparison, specifically for Dee, is in Charlie and Dee Find Love, when Dee goes completely off the rails with her majestic Bad Company performance and punching Mac in the nuts. Dee's misplaced confidence and her self-humiliation feel like they've kind of been sidelined for her rage and forcefulness this season, which makes her scenes with Trey move much slower, given that you can basically predict her line by line. Dennis's stuff with Tammy is fine as well, I guess, but it's really reminiscent of his lame bro persona in The Gang Gets New Wheels or his disheveled no-makeup self in D-Day, both of which I admit are well-written for their type of humor, but just make me cringe more than laugh. It's simply not my type. This story comes back in style for me when Dennis and Dee get back in the car and make a new plan. We first get a reference to Dee's misogyny when she seems offended by the fact that Trey does chores around the house, and then the two start a new competition for Trey Jr. and his girlfriend, seeing young love as much more interesting. Dennis sleeps with Carrie Bitterberry, no problem, but we actually see Dee reach a rare limit when she fails to go through with Trey Jr. This is probably my favorite Dee moment in the episode, her weighing the pros and cons of sleeping with a teenager in the same moment that she's in the room with him. In the end, Dee tells Trey Jr. that his girlfriend cheated on him with Dennis, and this leads to an ending honestly darker than the last episode, as Trey Jr. and Tammy commit Romeo and Juliet because of the twins' actions, which Dennis is apparently completely unaffected by. It's around this point that I'm starting to believe that Danny DeVito quote about Sonny holding back too much before this season, because they really are one episode away from Dennis being an actual pedophile, and that's pretty brave of Glenn Howerton considering he's now pushing 50 and is still comfortable with jokes about him creeping on 18-year-olds. So this is probably one of my least favorite episodes of the bunch in Season 17 so far, and it seems like I'm not alone in that since it's already fallen to the same IMDb score as Episode 4 in just 2 days. It's far from a bad outing, but the Trey and Tammy stuff simply doesn't feel like it's breaking any new ground, and Mac and Charlie's story is mainly build-up. Episode 7 is sure to have more meat in it, and the finale is going to be the whole goddamn sandwich, so set your alarms for Thursday the 21st. Episode 6 gets a 7 out of 10 for me. It's another one I probably won't come back to, but was enjoyable for the time being. Bye now.